Well, Prime Minister, Ministers, Stephen Smith, Jason Clare, Parliamentarians, Andrew Lee, Gay Brotman, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Your Excellencies, Commonwealth Agency, heads and staff, other distinguished guests, colleagues. On behalf of the university community, I warmly welcome the Prime Minister and all our distinguished guests to the Australian National University and to the ANU Crawford School of Public Policy. And in doing so, ask you to join with me, as we always do, in acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and paying our respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal people, past and present. Prime Minister, it's an enormous pleasure and privilege to have you with us today. We're really honoured by your presence and we look forward immensely to your presentation this morning, your launch this morning, the major new national security strategy. Document that's been, a presentation that's been very keenly anticipated by the national security policy community, so well represented here today, and will certainly be subjected to some very keen scrutiny both here and abroad. I have to say that on occasions like this, in front of a cast like this, and with a subject like this, I do feel just a twinge again of what I identified all those years ago, you may remember, as relevance deprivation syndrome. But what helps keep that very sad condition at bay is, above all, my total pride in this great national university of ours, the Commonwealth's own university, of which I have the honour to be Chancellor. I think most of us would probably agree, certainly the Prime Minister with her lifelong commitment to quality education at all levels, that the world's finest universities all have three characteristics in common. Not only do they provide an absolutely outstanding teaching and learning experience across multiple disciplines, and not only do they generate outstanding world-class research across multiple disciplines, but they also, and most immediately relevantly for today's purposes, they make an outstanding contribution to the wider community, locally, nationally and internationally. In the case of the ANU, I think we're universally recognised as doing all those things in abundance, and that it doesn't in fact require too much chutzpah, although Glyn Davis and my old alma mater down south would probably disagree. I don't think it requires too much cheek to describe ourselves now already as Australia's finest university. It's the community outreach and in particular the public policy aspect of our role that's on display at this event here today at the Crawford School of Public Policy, which we do hope and believe, with its new branding, its new resources, its splendid new building and wonderful cast of people associated with it, will be, before too long, for Australia and our region, what Harvard's Kennedy School has traditionally been for the United States. The Crawford School has within its broad umbrella many associated centres of excellence. And the two on whom we're particularly focusing today, because the Prime Minister is, after her address, opening the new wing of this school in which they're housed, are the ANZ School of Government under its new Dean, Gary Banks, and above all, the immediate host of the Prime Minister's address, the National Security College under the distinguished leadership of Professor Michael L'Estrange. Well, conscious as I am these days that my role is at best to be the warm-up for the main players to follow, I certainly won't steal the Vice-Chancellor's thunder by revealing the name that we've chosen for the new wing, except to say, as I must in the presence of his family, I couldn't name, that the man whom we'll be honouring, with whom I had a great deal to do in those halcyon days of the early 1980s, was unquestionably one of Australia's finest public servants, and one who completely embodied that spirit of commitment to excellent public policy making, which is at the heart of the role, as we see it, of the National Security College, of the wider Crawford School of Public Policy, and indeed of this whole Australian National University, in close partnership with, of course, the Australian Government and Parliament across the lake. So it's my very great pleasure to ask the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ian Young, to add his own welcome to mine, to announce the name of this fine new addition to the University's architectural landscape, and to introduce the unquestionable main event at this or any other occasion of Australian Prime Minister. But Ian Young.
Well, thank you, Gareth. Could I please add my personal welcome to the distinguished gathering here from government, academia, the diplomatic corps, and also particularly welcome the new Dean of the Australia and New Zealand School of Government, Professor Gary Banks. As the Chancellor indicated, the University is very proud to have entered into a revigorated partnership with the Commonwealth. This partnership reflects a shared interest in the development in the excellence of public policy. A critical area of national public policy, namely national security, is the focus of today's speech by the Prime Minister. Of course, here at ANU we believe there's no better place to deliver such a speech than at the Crawford School of Public Policy, the front door to the significant expertise which the University has in this area. We continue to invest in this public policy expertise, and we very much see public policy as a resource this university can and will deliver for the nation. Following her speech, the Prime Minister has kindly agreed to open the new wing of this building, which has been funded by the government as part of the ANU Commonwealth Strategic Partnership. The partnership, formally renewed in a Memorandum of Understanding in 2010, provides the platform for the Commonwealth and our national university to undertake joint initiatives, such as establishing the National Security College. During morning tea after this event, it will be my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister to unveil a plaque formally naming this the G.J. Yeend Wing. Unfortunately, Lady Yeend is unable to be here today, but we welcome her daughter, Julie, to the University for this naming. Sir Geoffrey Yeend's service to government extends through the terms of some 8 Prime Ministers, from Chifley through to Hawke, a period in which considerable changes took place in national and community aspirations, in political and policy settings, and in prime ministerial styles and personalities. It says a great deal about Sir Geoffrey's ability to absorb and adjust to new environments and new thinkings. Moreover, respect is most often earned when the advisor gives firm and clear advice, whether welcome or not, which is where Sir Geoffrey's values of honesty and integrity served him and successive governments so well. Geoffrey Yeend has also strong ANU connections, as the Chancellor indicated. He was first appointed Pro Chancellor of this university in 1988 and became Chancellor in 1990. As I said, we are delighted, however, today that the Prime Minister, the Honourable Julia Gillard, has seen fit to deliver an important speech on national security here at the National Security College. Certainly the media coverage over the last few days shows a considerable public interest in this important subject. So, without further ado, it is my great honour to welcome the Prime Minister and invite her to the lectern. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and in a spirit of reconciliation, paying my respects to elders past and present. The new wing of the building in which we meet today and which houses the National Security College has just been revealed to you as being named after the late Sir Geoffrey Yeend. Unfortunately, his widow, Lady Laurel, is unable to be with us today, but I'm very pleased that his daughter Julie is with us and that she is proudly continuing a family tradition as an officer of my department of PM&C. I think that's a wonderful continuity. I'd like to warmly acknowledge our hosts too today. The Honourable Gareth Evans. Gareth, you will always be relevant to me, let me assure you of that. Chancellor of this great university, but I'm not sure that it's prime ministerial to start picking best universities out of Australia, very controversial, but this great university. Professor Ian Young, Vice-Chancellor, thank you for the introduction. To the head of the National Security College, Professor Michael Lestrange and his staff, thank you for all the work that you are doing here. To Dr. Margot McCarthy, Chair of the National Security College Board, and her fellow board members, and of course Margot is our National Security Advisor. I'd also like to welcome, back from any Christmas leave that they managed to get, the Minister for Defence, Stephen Smith, the Minister for Home Affairs, Jason Clare, and my parliamentary colleagues here, Andrew Lee and Gabe Brotman. It's good to be with you. Can I acknowledge too the Secretary of my department, Ian Watt, Air Marshal Mark Binskin, Acting Chief of the Defence Force. Thank you for joining us. To other departmental secretaries and heads of national security agencies, members of the academic community, and to representatives of Australia's friends and partners with whom we work to build a safer world, thank you for coming along today. Friends, in Coonabarabran recently I met a woman who told me, with tears in her eyes, that she had just lost her home. The next thing she said to me, and she said it very quickly, was, "The family's all safe though, and that's what matters." They were words you could tell from the heart, and they're words really of supreme wisdom. When you have faced the worst, the recognition that life, safety, security is what matters is a recognition that's very sharp. As Prime Minister for our nation, I have to keep that recognition sharp every day, to join realism and patriotism and to act to keep our nation secure in the modern world. Our national security is and will always be the most basic expression of our sovereignty. Through the work of national security, we secure our borders, protect our people, and pursue our interests in the world. Like every country, those interests often overlap with those of allies, neighbours, and partners. But ultimately, our national interests are distinctively our own, pursued for our own reasons, driven by our values, and dictated by no other. So conscious of the weight of the responsibility and conscious too of the need to continually refresh our thinking in this time of change, I today launch this document, Strong and Secure, a strategy for Australia's national security, and I commend it to you. This national security strategy is Australia's first. I have decided that our nation must have such a strategy for three clear reasons. First, because national security is the most fundamental task of government. Second, because we are transitioning from one decade, the decade of 9/11, to a post-9/11 era, where some risks and challenges endure and others are evolving rapidly. Third, because national security absorbs some 8% of what the federal government spends on behalf of the Australian people, and the priorities for that expenditure should be defined. For each of these reasons, clarity is demanded in our strategic thinking and actions. Today, I outline that thinking and those actions. On September the 11th, 2001, in those dreadful short moments when we watched the Twin Towers collapse half a globe away, we all learned what it feels like to have your assumptions about your life and your security ripped away. Even as we mourned our losses, it was clear to lay people and security professionals alike that the world had changed in an immediate and fundamental manner. We entered what Alan Gingell has described as the national security decade, but what could also be described as the 9/11 decade, a decade in which we also lived through the Bali attacks, the Iraq War and Afghanistan, where the fight continues, a decade in which we were called to mount missions in East Timor and Solomon Islands. In the wake of 9/11, new anti-terrorism laws were introduced and our overall intelligence budgets tripled. Terrorism dramatically changed the way national security was conceptualised and the way it was undertaken. It broadened our view of which agencies across government contribute to our nation's security. It keenly highlighted the need for a joined-up national security community within and between intelligence agencies and across the fields of intelligence, law enforcement and border protection. The private sector and the wider community became close partners in achieving this endeavour. We looked at how we could maintain cohesion and harmony in a multicultural, multi-faith society placed under a period of tension and strain. We understood that 9/11 was an attack on our values and our way of life, and so in responding, we carefully weighed what needed to be done for our security and our values of democracy, fairness, respect for individuals, their rights and freedoms. Adding it all together, we carved out a new understanding of our national security. Australia's responses to this period of transformation culminated in Prime Minister Rudd's National Security Statement in 2008. This statement outlined for the first time a pathway of binding the detailed and diverse work of the whole national security community into a coherent, coordinated whole. The statement recognised the need for even closer integration of our national security effort and the modernisation of Australia's national security structures. As a result, the government appointed our nation's first National Security Advisor to improve strategic direction within the national security community and across the whole public sector. We introduced better coordination of budgets across national security agencies. We established this institution, the National Security College, to educate Australia's current and future national security leaders. And since the galvanising events of September 11 and Bali, our partners and Australia have secured some significant successes. Is dead. Al-Qaeda's senior leadership is fractured. Jamaat Islamiyah has been decimated in our region. Here at home, numerous terrorist plots have been thwarted and 23 convictions have resulted from the prosecution of those who planned such attacks. Afghanistan will soon take full responsibility for its own security, with transition in Uruzgan province on track to be completed by the end of this year and by the end of 2014 for Afghanistan as a whole. There have been other changes since Mr Rudd's statement. Our work in Iraq has been completed. In East Timor, our security presence has been drawn down after almost 13 years of involvement. Likewise, the Regional Assistance Mission to the Solomon Islands is transitioning to a new law enforcement assistance mission. At the same time, the effects of the global financial crisis, only then beginning to unfold in 2008, are now very clear. We can see that years of fiscal stringency lie ahead for Australia and for our allies and partners in the United States, the UK and Europe. These changes and continuities inform the national security strategy I launched today. Friends, the National Security Strategy is an open statement to the Australian community, our business sector, and to domestic and international partners. Our plans and intentions are clear for all to see. The strategy identifies our national security objectives and surveys our national security outlook. It sets out what we judge to be key risks to our security and describes the policies, institutions and capabilities, the key pillars which protect us. The National Security Strategy will also inform priority setting in a time of fiscal constraint. This will ensure we maximise the return on the considerable investment made by taxpayers in our national security efforts. It will also help bring our national security agencies closer together, providing greater coordination of effort as we meet the challenges of the future. Importantly, the strategy builds on the changes heralded in the 2008 National Security Statement and complements the Asian Century White Paper and the forthcoming Defence White Paper. The Asian Century White Paper is the roadmap to how Australia can thrive in the Asian century, replete with opportunities. But it also made clear that our national objectives in the region can only be realised if there is sustainable security in Asia. The National Security Strategy therefore charts the course for Australia to play its part in achieving that aim, a secure nation in a secure region. This strategy is being released as Australia enters a new era of national security imperatives. I offer you 3 intersecting conclusions about the national security imperatives of the next decade and consequently the risks our nation will face. First, our principal national security focus will be on our own region as the global economic and strategic centre of gravity continues to move east, bringing great opportunities but also risks and challenges that must be managed. Second, it will be an era in which the behaviour of states, not non-state actors, will be the most important driver and shaper of Australia's national security thinking. Third, it will be an era in which diplomacy will be critical as we and our friends and partners in the region strive to master the complexities and new dynamics of a multipolar world. The key risks that we see ahead include the traditional and familiar risks that nations have always faced, such as espionage and foreign interference, state-based conflict and coercion affecting our interests. The proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, specifically Iran's nuclear program and North Korea's continuing missile and nuclear programs, which are serious threats to world peace and regional stability, and instability in developing and fragile states. While understanding and managing state-based risks will require renewed effort, this does not mean that terrorism is defeated or we should ignore the malign intent of non-state actors. Therefore, the National Security Strategy also identifies as clear risks terrorism and violent extremism and an increasing burden from serious and organised crime. Recent events in Mali and the terrible murders in Algeria remind us that terrorism remains an enduring threat. Global terrorism showed us on 9/11 that it has the capacity to surprise us and to surpass our worst fears. It could do so again, so we will always be vigilant. And as we transition in Afghanistan, our commitment to our goal of ensuring it is never again a safe haven for terrorism remains undiminished. As a result, we are making a significant commitment to funding the Afghan National Security Forces after 2014, and we will make an ongoing contribution to their training. The government will also consider a contribution to a Special Forces counter-terrorism mission in Afghanistan, but under the right mandate. In fighting organised crime, we work at the interface between national security and domestic policing policies. For example, our current work at Australia's borders to stop and seize illegal guns matters for community safety. Communities such as those in Sydney's West rightly want to know every level of government is acting on their concerns about community safety and that we are working together. In this digital age, we also face the new and growing threat from state and non-state actors of malicious cyber activity, which poses such dangers to government, to business and to individuals. So this too is a risk clearly identified in the strategy. Understanding those risks clarifies the strategic environment and the likely contours of the decade ahead of us. But in commissioning this strategy, I did not want this merely to be a list of risks and challenges or a statement of doctrine. I also wanted clear priorities to direct government activity and resources in a real and concrete way. Accordingly, the National Security Strategy identifies 3 specific areas where the government will be dedicating increased effort over the next 5 years. First, effective partnerships. In an increasingly complex and interconnected strategic environment, we can only succeed by working smart and by working together. Working smart means clear priorities. Defining those priorities is the purpose of this strategy, and I today commit to updating the strategy every 5 years or sooner should events require it. Under the auspices of this strategy, we will continue to refine our analysis of national security risks and further improve our coordinated national security budget process. We will also develop a national security capability plan to complement the Defence Capability Plan. In pursuit of clear priorities, it is easier to reach out and include others in that effort. By others, I not only mean all parts of the federal government, but also our colleagues in the states and territories, foreign governments and non-government partners, particularly business. So in pursuit of partnerships, my message to our national security community is, if you see a silo, dig it up. Not only because a silo mentality constrains thinking, but it also risks wasting resources. The national security decade was a time of rapid ramp-up in resources. Now, inevitably, we are in a period of consolidation and we need to get the most value out of every dollar expended. Therefore, our national security arrangements must adapt and respond, harnessing information, ideas and capabilities from all sources and prioritising our spending in a clear-headed way. Friends, the second identified area for increased effort is cybersecurity. As we roll out the National Broadband Network, we are deploying a more sophisticated focus on cybersecurity. Australia is an attractive target for a range of malicious cyber actors, from politically motivated hackers and criminal networks to nation states. This not only has the potential to affect governments, but business and the community alike. For the public sector, we must ensure that our most important networks are some of the hardest to compromise in the world. But government alone cannot develop a secure and safe digital environment. We must continue to work closely with industry and international partners to develop a set of global norms for online behaviour. The internet must remain open, but also be secure. The government has already committed substantial funding and additional effort to strengthen our cyber capabilities, including a $1.46 billion effort out to 2020 to strengthen our most sensitive networks. I have also established the Office of the Cyber Policy Coordinator within my department to provide leadership and coordination on this important issue. In the same spirit, tomorrow I will formally announce the development by the end of the year of a new Australian Cybersecurity Centre. This will be a world-class facility continuing existing cybersecurity capabilities combining existing cybersecurity capabilities across the Attorney General's Department, Defence, ASIO, the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Crime Commission, all in a single location. We want people working together, and co-location assists with that. It will provide Australia with an expanded and more agile response capability to deal with all cyber issues, be they related to government or industry, crime or security. Importantly, it will also create a hub for greater collaboration with the private sector, state and territory governments and international partners to combat the full breadth of cyber threats. Malicious cyber activity will likely be with us for many decades to come, so we must be prepared for a long, persistent fight. Friends, perhaps nothing better characterises the National Security Strategy than the third of our key focus areas, and that is enhanced regional engagement. This acknowledges the shift in the global strategic and economic centre of gravity to our region and the need for security as the indispensable foundation of prosperity. Asia's rise is, of course, no surprise to Australia. As far back as 1989, the Garneau White Paper served notice, if any was needed, that Australia's future lay in Asia. Indeed, our engagement with the region can be traced back to the Chifley government's support for Indonesian independence in the 1940s and the Commerce Agreement with Japan in 1967. We have a long tradition of engagement to draw on, but Asia is changing as economic growth leads to shifts in the established strategic order. We are seeing rising government incomes enabling many states to modernise their defence forces with more advanced capabilities. At the same time, population growth and rising wealth levels are putting pressure on energy, water and food resources. All this means our strategic landscape is becoming more crowded and more complex. But it also remains true that it is the relationship between China and the United States that more than any other will determine the temperature of regional affairs in coming decades. We remain optimistic about the ability of China and the United States to manage change in the region, but their relation inevitably brings with it strategic competition as China's global interests expand. None of these developments of themselves make major power conflict inevitable, but they do make the consequences of any conflict more far-reaching and dangerous. They raise the cost of any miscalculation that may occur in a range of regional flashpoints, such as North Korea, the Taiwan Straits, the South China and East China Seas, or India-Pakistan. And they underline the need to build a regional order in Asia which can manage strategic change peacefully. The remarkable growth we see in Asia could not have happened without an environment of relative peace and security. Continuing and deepening that climate of relative peace and stability is at the forefront of Australia's national security agenda. Indeed, nothing is more important in Australia's security outlook. That is why last year's Asian Century White Paper made it very clear that we need to construct, and I quote, a peace in which all the region's countries have a voice in its future, which is guided by established rules and transparent behaviour, and which decisions are taken without threats of the use of force or other forms of intimidation. In other words, we must strive to shape a secure international environment that builds trust and is built on trust. It is the only way we will continue to enjoy the growth and prosperity that has so transformed our region and our future. Friends, in preparing for the future, Australia needs to be confident that we can also shape that future. The post-war period has taught us just how successful we can be as a creative middle power with links to the old and new worlds, backed by credible military and economic strength. So Australia has a key role to play in building patterns of cooperation and trust in the Asia-Pacific and in the wider world. This understanding is an enduring pillar of Australia's approach to national security. We know that no single relationship, arm of government or multilateral body will deliver the understanding, trust and action required to secure a peaceful and stable Asian century. It is more complex than that, but I am an optimist about our ability to manage this complexity. After all, Australia is the world's 12th largest economy. We have a place on the G20 and have secured its hosting. We now hold a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, putting us at the centre of international cooperation on peace and security. We have long championed a multilateral rules-based order in our region in which disputes are resolved peacefully without the use or threat of force or coercion. We support efforts to build a stronger East Asia Summit in which all countries have a voice and which can help manage regional strategic change and build confidence. We are helping strengthen defence-to-defence dialogue through the Asean Defence Ministers Plus meeting. We support our ally, the United States, in continuing to play its role as a stabilising force in the region. We are building deeper relationships with China, Indonesia, India, Japan and Korea, amongst others. We will increase our diplomatic footprint abroad and increase the expertise of our professionals working in the Asian region. Our diplomatic efforts are complemented by an aid program that focuses on the Asia-Pacific and a strong network of law enforcement and intelligence relationships. Importantly, Australia will continue to maintain one of the strongest military capabilities in our region. And let's be clear, in a time of fiscal constraint, we will keep the Australian Defence Force strong. Our level of defence expenditure will ensure that Australia remains one of the top 15 nations for absolute defence spending and second only to the United States in per capita spending. Our ADF will have the best people with the right equipment for the challenges of the Asian century. As we transition from East Timor, Solomon Islands and Afghanistan, our Defence Force will fix its sights on extending and deepening relationships across the region. This will include joint military exercises and high-level military exchanges with China, reflecting in defence the cooperation and the cooperative spirit that exists in other aspects of our friendship. A strong nation will possess a credible defence force. A wise nation will work hard never to require its use. Friends, the 9/11 decade is ending and a new one is taking its place. That's why I launched the National Security Strategy today. As an active middle power with global interests, Australia will work hard to anticipate threats and protect the nation. Nothing in our grasp will be left to chance. We will shape the world in our interests and values, not just respond to events as they arise. We will ensure that Australians remain secure at home and our nation is strong in the world. We will help keep our nation safe. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the head of the National Security College and on behalf of the University, can I thank the Prime Minister very sincerely for your presence today and for choosing this forum in which to make such a significant statement launching the National Security Strategy. This is a strategy that covers a very wide range of threats, risks, opportunities and priorities that will shape policy making in the period ahead and will certainly shape the operations of the national security community. For the National Security College, as a joint initiative of the Commonwealth and the Australian National University, the issues encompassed in this strategy will certainly shape much of our work and goes to the very heart of our mission. And we very much look forward, along with others, as the Chancellor indicated, in exploring the implications and the consequences of this strategy in all that we do. In the executive education work we do with officials of the national security community, in the academic programs we run for the wider community, in our research and publications, and in our outreach. So thank you very much for your presence. We've been honoured to host you. To everybody else, can I thank you all for your presence today, and to many in this room for your support of the National Security College over the past 3 years or so. It's been deeply appreciated. I'd ask you all now, if you could, to join us for morning tea outside prior to a brief unveiling ceremony of the new wing. But in asking you to do that, could I just request that you wait just a moment as I invite the Prime Minister's party to depart.